Hello everyone and welcome back to another Skin Club video. It's me Ted and we're ready to dive right into another really interesting Counter-Strike topic. I want to start this one off by giving a huge shout out to everyone that watched the previous video, which was about James and his redemption with the side of Parivision. And then obviously for those of you that gave it a couple minutes to go through that Twists article about him returning into FaZe Clan, the entire path of Twists. I'm just giving you a bit of a reminder in case you haven't checked that one out. Make sure you go and do that. It's published on SkinClub's articles tab, of course, as well as all the other content brought in by me and, of course, by all my lovely colleagues, I guess, that are doing content for SkinClub as well. But yeah, big shout out SkinClub. We're ready to jump into another conversation. And without further ado, let's get right into it. Today, we will be speaking about my favorite player. And when I say that, I'm not over exaggerating. Now, obviously, after being a broadcast talent for the last 4 or 5 years, I've learned that it's really difficult to have a favorite player or a favorite team now that I'm working in the industry. It's more, I respect the people that play well, and I like the people that have the right mindset, the right work ethic, and play well on the server. And I'm just enjoying the game, and I'm all in for good Counter-Strike. But back in the day, 2016, when I was in high school and I was just getting into Counter-Strike, there was one particular player that caught my attention. It was my favorite player for many years, pretty much up until I started being a broadcast talent, because that kind of aligned with the ending stages of his professional career, at least the one that was really worth paying attention to, and when he was still considered one of the best mechanical players in the world. In today's video, we're going to be talking about k0nfig. Now, the reason I've chosen k0nfig for this, and there's probably going to be an article coming in about his entire career and everything that he's gone through and why I think he was such a special player and he's such a nice lesson for young players, is because I think this is a topic that could be explored into a lot of depth. Right, you could really go down into it, starting from this video and then going through an article. The next 2 pieces of content I'm going to be doing are going to be about k0nfig and some of the main lessons, I guess, that you can take away from his entire professional career. Now, for those of you that don't really know, this is what we're going to start it off with. k0nfig retired and is becoming an agent. He said, and I'm quoting, "I don't want to see anyone else go through what I've gone through because it breaks you." So this is an article done on HLTV by Lucas. I strongly recommend you go and check it out. It's a pretty long one. But the main points that we're going to be focusing on when it comes down to k0nfig is how his professional career developed. And we're going to try and answer the question, was k0nfig really that good in this particular video? Now, for those of you that have been following Counter-Strike since the start of CS2 or maybe the last couple of years of CSGO, but are not really fans that are dating back from the times before 2020, pre-COVID, you probably don't really know why people were hyping up k0nfig so much at the start of 2021, 2022, even a little bit when he went on in towards NIP, right? Obviously on NIP, he's been on the bench since February of 2024, so it's been a year and a half since we've actually seen him play official games. So for him to go out and say I've retired is not really breaking news, right? You could say that you were probably expecting to see something of the likes happen soon enough, or sooner rather than later. Now, before NIP, because that was the time that a lot of us associate k0nfig with, obviously there was that entire Astralis fiasco, right? He was part of that team with BlameF. Astralis was not doing too bad. They had that one really good event in Copenhagen for Blast where they played good Counter-Strike. In general, it was nothing special on Astralis, and we all remember the story of how everything ended with that entire trip to Malta and for Pro League, I believe it was, and that entire unfortunate situation in front of a nightclub in Malta that, unfortunately, I feel like then and there put an end to k0nfig's chances to actually achieve what he probably could have as a player. Now, he's 28, he's taken on a different path, but let's take a bit of a deep dive into what happened before that with Christian Winnick. Now, the reason a lot of people were, and excuse the pun, because his first team was Reason that he played on. The reason a lot of people were hyped up about k0nfig that watched Counter-Strike between 2020 or 2015 and 2020 was because he was one of the biggest talents coming out of the Danish scene. And I'm not over exaggerating here. k0nfig was one of the best mechanical players to ever touch the game to come out of Denmark. He was one of those guys that would go out in interviews and say, the enemy team is afraid of me. That's why they're using utility, because they know if they don't flash me or smoke me or throw a molly in my feet, I'm just going to be better than them, and I'm just going to demolish them, right? That was his mindset. k0nfig is that type of a special player that always believes in himself. He believes in himself to that extent that his recklessness becomes a superpower. And this is quite convenient because I did write an article about that around 3 or 4 months ago. Is recklessness a superpower? I truthfully believe that it is. And in k0nfig's case, it was, but it was also to some extent his biggest enemy and worst nightmare, because this was the thing that I feel like limited the way that he was looking at a lot of stuff. Now, what we've learned about k0nfig over the years is that he's a really emotional guy. He's a guy that dedicates himself a lot to trying to achieve what he wants to, but what we did learn towards the early stages of his career was that he was a bit of a diva, right? And that was what was making him so appealing for people to watch, so entertaining, if you will. He would go in, he would think about his individual performance a little bit more, even though I feel like he's always been a bit of a sacrificial player in some sense, but he always felt like an individual, an individualistic player. And towards the end, when he wasn't that great, it didn't really feel spectacular. He still had some of those pop-off moments on Astralis, Complexity, Optic, and even on NIP, where he would just take the server by storm, right? He would be that type of a special player. That's why I would even put him in the top maybe 3% in terms of pure talent. If you're looking at the last 10 years, or at least the latter stages of CSGO, maybe not counting CS2, but definitely the latter stages of CSGO, and between the period of 2018 and 2022, I'd say he was one of the most talented players to touch the game. He was sharp. He had incredible vision for how he can win his fights, and he was going into everything without any fear. He was a soldier. He was an absolute soldier on the team. But the best year, the year in which we really got to see prime k0nfig, and that is a little bit of a throwback, but that was 2017. 2017 k0nfig was a top 20 player of the world. He was positioned on number 14 according to HLTV, and considering back then Nord was the second best Danish team, obviously we're talking about the prime Astralis era, or at least the start of it in 2017 when they won that Atlanta major. k0nfig contributed to North winning the DreamHack Comp in Montreal. They reached second place, at ESO Pro League Season 5, where they lost to G2. That French super team of G2, obviously, with Shox and KENYS and Apex and MBK and all of the guys and Body. And then the DreamHack Masters Malmö, again, second place. Third place is the DreamHack Masters Las Vegas and E-League Premier. So we're talking about a player that was incredibly difficult to tame. The biggest issue in k0nfig's career, I feel like, has been consistency. You're talking about first bullet accuracy. You're talking about his capabilities to join in the server and just take over completely. He had all of those things. If you had to draw a comparison, you would probably say that maybe play style wise, he's going to resemble a little bit someone like Flamesy nowadays. Obviously, Flamesy is a lot more successful and a lot more solid and a lot more of a complete player, you could say, being on that Vitality team. But k0nfig had the potential to be a Flames. k0nfig had the potential to be one of the best Danish players in the world and one of the best players in general in the world. And at a certain point, individually, he was one of the best individual players in the world. Even if you're looking at some of the stats for opening kills, for kills per round, for impact, he was a top 10 rifler. He really was a top 10 rifler. So what happened? What went wrong with k0nfig? That's the big question, isn't it? I feel like it's just an amalgamation of a lot of wrong circumstances, right? Obviously, he himself has always had his individual demons, personal demons to try and fight, but the main thing for me is that his entire story, the story of a prodigy that raised up through the ranks of Reason, of SK, Copenhagen Wolves, then played with MSL, Rubino, Magus con Dignitas. They won that tournament in Moscow, which got them the transfer into North, obviously. And then he spent a couple years there. Then he went over to Optic. k0nfig was a top-tier talent. He was one of the most flamboyant, one of the most entertaining riflers that you can see play Tier 1 Counter-Strike, and he ended his entire career by playing just 7 majors and making major playoffs just twice. So what is the main morale of the story? Well, the main morale of the story is that a couple of wrong decisions, backed up maybe by not the best mindset going into stuff and not the best decision making, could waste even the biggest talents. And when I say that, I know a lot of you are going to be listening to this and saying he was never that great. No, he was. And this is a hill that I'm ready to die on, because k0nfig was one of the sharpest players out there. Obviously, we're not talking as sharp as a top 5 player. Obviously, we're not comparing him to, let's say, Cold0 from that time, or Simple from that time, or even Device, or a lot of other, even if you want to talk riflers, you're not comparing him to Nico, for example. But he was up there, and he would go toe-to-toe with a lot of those guys in important games, and he would be one of the most exciting players to watch back at the time. So that's why I feel like this entire topic is really a really sad one, especially for me, because I think this is the prime example of someone that got the chances to play on a couple decent teams, got the chances to play on a couple big organizations, and just couldn't land it. Now, for us to stand here and be like, this is the one definitive reason why it didn't happen, it would be nearly impossible unless we've been on a team with him, right? Because we couldn't really know what his behavior was like, because on NAP, for example, it felt like his behavior was good. From my perspective, this is a good example of someone that was stuck in his own ways and couldn't really evolve. But yeah, this is the story of k0nfig. Unfortunately, now retired. No previous matches, few achievements, not a lot of things that he was able to do in his career, bar reach a couple nice playoffs. And I guess that win from DreamHack Open Montreal and the one from Epicenter Moscow with Dignitas are going to stay as his only 2 trophies. But I feel like for me, k0nfig is that type of a player that will always be remembered as one of the big what-ifs. What if he was on a more functional Astralis? What if he was making a couple better decisions? What if he was able to change his ways and adapt and evolve with the game? Those are questions that unfortunately will never be answered. But yeah, for me, k0nfig is that type of a player that I will always remember as maybe one of the biggest wasted talents of CSGO.